I am Angela Scala, president of the 19th Century Charitable Association, and I am so pleased to welcome you all to today's program. The mission of the 19th is to strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building, which we envision as a dynamic cultural center for community learning. And today's program checks all those boxes. Now, I would like to introduce Gert Johnson, co-chair of the Development Committee, who was responsible for this program and who will introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Friends, I want to thank all of you for coming today. This has truly been a real treat to be able to think that Mrs. Pritzker, MK, has asked us or permitted us to have her come and be our presenter today. And I am just delighted to share this beautiful book with all of you. I've got to say, it was about a year ago that I happened to be at the library, and I saw this book, this great big book off in the distance, and I sat down, and it was 3 hours later when I left because I found out that I could take the book out of the library. Well, those of you who are members may have seen it because I had it over here at the club, and 4 months later, I took it back to the library. So I've got to say, friends, I had to buy the book. In all conscience, I just couldn't keep it any longer, but I wanted and made it my own treasure. Today, friends, I want to introduce you to MK Pritzker. This is a young woman who was she was born in Nebraska and then taken to South Dakota, where her family had moved. And she went back to Nebraska to go for college. Well, in her junior year, she was very fortunate and was invited to Washington to take part in a program at the Senate office building with Tom Daschle. They liked her so much that they asked her to please stay on a little longer. And you know, what a wonderful experience for a young person to be able to do that. The other part of the story is, there was a sweet young thing who was in the office across the hall that the people in the office thought should meet. And so the rest is history, because she's now Mrs. Pritzker. All right, now that's the good news, and all of us like those kinds of scoops. But the other thing about this woman is, after she finished her college degree, she went on and took part in working in historical architecture at the Art Institute. And so it's wonderful that we have her in our historical building to be able to enjoy. At any rate, she also was the individual who was responsible for setting up the Pritzker Foundation and the good things that came out of that. The Pritzker School of Law at Northwestern is a place where she worked hard to raise funds for people to have scholarships. In addition, she was very interested in another organization called the Evergreen Initiative, and there, individuals were able to take part in equestrian competitions, and they raised $6 million for Northwestern Hospital for women's health. She just has had her hands on lots and lots of things, but COVID was the time when she was newly the wife of the governor, and they had the opportunity then to start working and changing things at the mansion and doing the work on the refurbishing. She has many more things, and I'm not going to go into that because I want you to start seeing her thoughts and her actions in the new format that exists there. Please give a warm welcome to MK Pritzker.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that lovely lunch. It was really delicious. Thank you for the servers and everyone here at the club that took such good care of us. I am so thrilled to be here today at the 19th Century Charitable Association. Thank you, Gert Johnson, for that great introduction, and thank you for inviting me. I would also like to thank Angela Scala, the president of the 19th Century Charitable Foundation, as well, for having me. There are some VIPs in the audience I'd like to recognize. Kathy Aducci, who is the village president of River Forest, and Rory Hoskins, the mayor of Forest Park. Don Harmon, whose sister wrote the letter that was delivered to me by Don. Don has his ways of getting people to show up. So Don, thank you for delivering the letter. Eileen Lynch, Don's administrative assistant, thank you. And Julia Harmon Bell, who wrote the letter and is Don's sister. So thank you so much. I wouldn't be here today without all of you. So thank you so much. You have such great personalities here in Oak Park. I've just felt so welcomed. So thank you, Gert, for that great introduction. So I'll jump right in now. So this is the cover of the book that I wrote during COVID, because what else was I going to do? We were all locked up, right? It's called A House That Made History, and I decided to write the book within the first year that JB was governor. So we arrived at the mansion, and my predecessor, Diana Rauner, had raised a tremendous amount of money. And whenever I give one of these talks, I always like to give her a shout out because she worked tremendously hard on the restoration of this building. She raised money for the roof, the HVAC, the doors and the windows, and she got a tremendous amount done in 3 years, including raising all that money. So when JB and I arrived at the house, we've kind of found a really well-baked cake that needed frosting. I just needed to finish the project. And I was kind of thankful that I got to do the fun part. So I always like to give a shout out to Diana Rauner because she really did a tremendous job. And it really was a partnership. None of us do anything alone. We all need help, and she certainly did her lion's share. So JB took one look at the house and said, MK, you have to fix this so that I can have people over and entertain. Because it basically was a very well-built house that didn't have a lot of furniture, and it had a kind of a cold feel to it. And any of you have met him know that he is a really gregarious guy and loves people and would love to have all of you over to the mansion and have cocktails. I'm sure Don can attest to that. He's been there many times for all kinds of events. But JB, he would have a party every night. So I got to work, and I called my friend Michael Smith, who I'll talk about a little bit later in the program, and decided I had to get some furniture, and I had to be quick about this, and I had to decorate the mansion. So I got to work, and I started learning about all the people that occupied the structure before I arrived. And I found the characters and the people that associated with this house so fascinating that I just kept reading about him. I kept going to the library, and I instilled the state historians to tell me more. Can I find more information about these folks? I said, I have to write a book. I have to write a book about this beautiful house and showcase the interiors and all the best of Illinois and tell the stories of the people that came before me. So that's how this all started. So this is the cover of the book, and to the left of that is what the house looks like today. So this is probably the most famous resident of Springfield, Abraham Lincoln. And I love to start out my presentation talking about Abraham Lincoln. I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. I have a dog named Lincoln. My favorite horse of all time, my hunter that I used to ride, his name was Lincoln. I have a Lincoln car. So I love all things Lincoln. And then I ended up with this mansion that actually Abraham Lincoln did the appropriation when he was in the Senate in Springfield. So he was actually really involved in the creation of the governor's mansion. And I love to read this quote from Abraham Lincoln. This is what he said to the people of Springfield when he was boarding the train to Washington, D.C. to be inaugurated as president. He says, "To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here I have lived a quarter of a century and have passed from a young to an old man. Here my children have been born and one is buried. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return." So Abraham Lincoln loved Springfield, and I have come to really love Springfield, and what an incredibly special place Springfield, Illinois is, not only to the people of Illinois, but to the people of the United States of America. And I really encourage each and every one of you to enjoy our history and come to Springfield and visit and see these historic places for yourself. Another little interesting fact about Abraham Lincoln, he really maintained his friendships with the people of Springfield, and he wanted to move back to Springfield, Illinois when he was done being president. And in fact, many of his friends had gotten together and they were going to purchase the house across the street for Abraham Lincoln and his wife Mary to return to when he was done being president. Fortunately, that house burned down and it is now a Baptist church. It's right across the street from the mansion. So I'm going to start at the beginning and throw in a little bit of history. So this is the first photograph that we have of the 1855 mansion. It was completed in 1855, and it's an Italianate style with a Greek revival interior. And this is the earliest photo we have of the mansion. And to the left of that is a picture of John Mills Van Osdell, who was the architect of the house. And he really was the first architect of Chicago. And he became very, very famous after the Chicago fire. He had so many commissions, he couldn't even keep up with it. And he built a lot of structures in the city of Chicago. So Joel Matheson, right here, pictured with his family, he was the first governor that occupied the mansion, and he actually oversaw the building of the mansion. And to the left of him is Governor Bissell, who was a very, very close friend of Abraham Lincoln. At one point, they were rivals, and they were going to run against each other for governor, but Abraham Lincoln bowed out so that Bissell could become governor, and they were such close friends. Abraham Lincoln helped him write a lot of his speeches, counseled him on how to be governor, and they were so close that their families were intertwined. And there's a famous story about how Governor Bissell's nieces and nephews locked the governor and Abraham Lincoln out of the house on the porch and wouldn't let him back in the house until they promised to buy them like a giant bag of candy. And in fact, when Governor Bissell passed away in the mansion, Abraham Lincoln was there visiting his dear friend. And he died in the house on March 18th in 1860. Next slide. So this is Governor Richard Oglesby, who probably is, I would say, ranked up there in maybe the top 3 governors that the state of Illinois has had. He was 3 times elected governor, very important man, also a very close friend of Abraham Lincoln. And his wife, right there, First Lady Anna, she died in the mansion of tuberculosis, so he became a widower. Another few interesting facts about Governor Oglesby is he was responsible for repealing a lot of the state's black laws that targeted black people unfairly. He also, like I said, was a really great friend of Abraham Lincoln, and in fact was in Washington, D.C. the day Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and had met with Abraham Lincoln in the White House that day. And when Governor Oglesby heard that Abraham Lincoln had been shot, he rushed to the house they had taken Abraham Lincoln to, and he was there when he died. And Governor Oglesby was very, very instrumental in the legacy of Abraham Lincoln and what happened to him after he passed away. As you can imagine, his wife Mary was very distraught, and Governor Oglesby came up with a plan and guided Mary on where Abraham Lincoln was to be buried. He organized with the committee how the funeral processional was going to go across the United States. He ensured everything that happened. He had Abraham Lincoln lay in state at the old state capitol and was very instrumental in that. So we have a lot to thank Governor Oglesby for. So like I said, he was elected 3 times, and then he remarried. He married a big personality. Her name was Emma, and she was the daughter of a very wealthy cattle baron. And she was an Anglophile and loved anything English. So she would have these wild parties at the mansion where you'd have to come as a Dickens character. And she was just a really good time. And she hired a portrait artist to paint herself and her children in English attire. I don't think I could get away with this. First of all, my kids would not wear those clothes. Just saying. Would not happen today. But she's dressed in, royal attire, and she loved all things English. So I'm sure a lot of you recognize this picture. This is Frederick Douglass, and on the left is Governor John Palmer. So Frederick Douglass, as you know, was an incredible orator, and he was on his way to St. Louis to give a speech and was not received well in St. Louis. They would not listen to him. They kind of ran him out of town. So he made his way to Springfield, Illinois, where he was received by the governor and was given an opportunity to speak to the people of Illinois, and they had a big party for him at the mansion. And a lot of people don't know this, that Frederick Douglass was received at the governor's mansion, where they had a big reception with all the lawmakers, and he was really well received. And I'm very proud of the fact that, Illinois was such a welcoming and open state at the time, which I think our legacy continues here today. So this is a picture of the daughter of Florence Pfeiffer, and her dad was governor 1889 to 1893, and she was a character. And I'm just going to say, I think she was her father's favorite child. She was a tomboy. She had all kinds of animals. She had a pet alligator that she kept at the mansion. She had a pony named Dixie that she used to ride around town, and in fact, she rode this pony up the front stairs of the house quite frequently. She'd pop in on her father's meetings. She would slide down the banister of the mansion and just cause all kinds of havoc. And what's so interesting about Florence is she ended up being a political force of her own. She was the first woman elected to the state senate in Illinois, a few years after women were given the right to vote. She also organized and created the PTA here in Illinois, and she was quite a force. In fact, they have a statue of her at the state capitol. So next, we're going to talk about the Tanner administration. So this was the first period where they did a lot of remodeling to the house. It was under Governor Tanner's administration. So you'll see here on your left, that is a rendering of what the house looked like in 1855. And on the right there is a photograph of what the house looked like after the Tanners remodeled it. So they tried to change the structure to be more in fashion of the time. So they didn't like the cupola. So basically what they did is they built a mansard roof over the cupola and buried the cupola inside of the house. They changed the windows from the multi-pane into the single-pane windows. They changed the front door. As you can see, they added a stone walkway there with a bas-relief sculpture in the front and made it a double entrance. The cupola remains today, and you can see it from the second floor. So if you stand on the second floor and look up, that is what it looks like today. The cupola is still there, buried inside of the roof. It's kind of strange, but it looks kind of neat on the inside, I think. They also changed the staircase. It had an oval staircase, and they changed it to this straight staircase that was very fashionable at the time, and they copied it from the Palace Fontainebleau in France. They also, on another note, they also painted the house a shade of white because they wanted it to look more like the White House at this time, too. So this is First Lady Tanner, Cora Tanner, who is probably my favorite First Lady for a few reasons. One is she loved horses. I love to show this picture of her in her riding togs. I love horses too, and all animals, as did she. She was a very well-educated woman and very, very feisty. And she stood up for a lot of things and had a big voice and a big personality. In fact, she wouldn't marry the governor. She was one of the most eligible women to marry in the United States. She was written about in all kinds of magazines and press from coast to coast. So when Governor Tanner got elected, she said, "Okay, I'll marry you." So then she became First Lady. And they had a huge inauguration that thousands and thousands of people came, and it was really quite a to-do. She was very neat. She also spoke up about lynching and how terrible lynching was, and she wrote a letter that was printed all across the United States, which, if you can imagine at the time, women couldn't even vote, and here she was expressing political opinions and receiving a lot of press, and I'm sure some of it wasn't good, but she stood her ground and stood up. So I think she's my favorite First Lady. In fact, I'll read you the quote from the letter that she had published. She says, "There is no fit time to ignore the law. Protection is the religion of our nation, and the law protects, defends, and prescribes for all emergencies, not in the heat of passion, with inflamed hysterical brain and barbarous thirst for blood, but scruple for scruple and dram for dram, carefully weighing our offenses. No matter how hideous the crime or petty the sin, we cannot live in this world without justice, nor in the world to come without mercy." So I think her words today are even as relevant as they were back then. It's very inspired by Cora Tanner. It's really important, I think, to remember these people that came before us and learn the lessons that they taught us, and not to forget their courage. So that's why I wrote this book. Next picture. Oh, and I missed a whole picture there. I'm sorry. Can you go back? That was the picture of the stable that Cora Tanner had built on the grounds where she kept her horses, which is now the garage for the mansion. So this is a picture of, at the time, Vice President Theodore Roosevelt, who came to Springfield to visit Governor Richard Yates and First Lady Helen Wadsworth Yates. And here they are on the front porch of the mansion. This picture was taken 2 weeks before McKinley was assassinated and Theodore Roosevelt became President of the United States. And next to that is the picture of the luncheon that they had for the Vice President. And as you can see, it was a bewilderment of decor. I'm not sure what was going on there, but it's a lot of decoration. I just think it's so fun to look at these old pictures and see how people lived. It's really interesting. I'm sure Theodore Roosevelt loved it. Do you see Roosevelt spelled out on the mantle there? So in 1908, there was a race riot in Springfield that was caused by, surprise, surprise, we've heard this story many times, where 2 black men were falsely accused of a crime. Turned out they didn't do it, kicked off a very large race riot, practically burned the town down. It was a terrible chapter in our history, and this is a picture of what the city of Springfield looked like in 1908. And the next slide, there are 2 people that were very affected by this race riot that I love to talk about. The first one here is this very handsome gentleman, Clarence Liggins, who moved to Illinois from Kentucky, and he worked in state government, and he was an assistant to a lot of the constitutional officers, Secretary of State, and a lot of people that worked in the Capitol, and he found his way to work for the governor. He was a very popular guy, and during the race riots, this gentleman was so beloved, he and his family took refuge in the governor's mansion where he and his family were protected during this race riot. So they survived, but he's going to come back into my story later, and so I love to talk about him. He was such a character. He walked around Springfield and he had a cane that was a gun that shot bullets. I see you have a cane right here. I bet that's not a Liggins model, is it? No. There it is. The other gentleman pictured, William Donegan, who was the most well-respected, prominent black man that lived in Springfield. He had several businesses. He was really well known because he made shoes and boots, and in fact made boots for Abraham Lincoln. So when the race riot broke out, they targeted Mr. Donegan and they went after him and they lynched him across the street from his house, which is actually on the corner of the Capitol grounds now, and they killed him. And I think it's just really important to show his picture and remember this terrible fact from our history, and it's really, important to keep talking about him. So, William Donegan and Clarence Liggins. Clarence is coming back in the story in a few slides. I'll leave you with the cliffhanger. Also, it's important to note that the NAACP was actually formed because of this 1908 race riot in Springfield. So now we're moving on to Governor Frank Loudon administration, 1917 to 1921. This is the next period in the architectural history that this mansion was remodeled significantly. So Governor Frank Loudon married Florence Pullman, the daughter of the Pullman railway car. So she was very wealthy. And she used her own money to restore the mansion. And they made a few changes. They added this awning, and they hired the gentleman pictured here on the far side of the screen, O.C. Simmons, a landscape architect who basically invented the prairie-style landscaping. He really brought it into fashion with native plants as landscape as opposed to having very fussy, French or Italian-style gardens. And he brought that style to Springfield, as you can see. He did a lot of interesting landscapes in Chicago. He did Chicago's Graceland Cemetery, Lincoln Park, the Morton Arboretum, and the Fort Sheridan Army Post. So we can see a lot of his work still today. So this is what the mansion looked like on the inside during the Loudon administration. So you can see here the foyer and the drapery that was in the hallway, and you can see the remodeled staircase is still straight from the previous Tanner administration. And over there we have a picture of what the music parlor looked like in 1920. So here's picture of another very famous Illinois governor, Governor Henry Horner, who I think is probably JB's favorite governor. He was the first Jewish governor of the state of Illinois. He was a very compassionate man and did a lot he's very famous for helping people that needed help. For instance, you've probably all heard of the Henry Horner homes. He was a very compassionate guy, and he loved animals, and he also happened to be very good friends with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who actually came to the mansion to visit Governor Horner, and Illinois at the time was experiencing a really awful drought, and so the president came to address that situation. And there you can see how they all gathered at the front of the mansion, and the president spoke, and the people listened to him. So it's kind of interesting history. So Governor Horner was a big fan of Abraham Lincoln, and he collected everything and anything Lincoln. And his collection actually was so large that they had to put supports on the first floor of the governor's mansion to hold up this room because it had so many books in it. So this is a picture of Governor Horner on the second floor of the mansion, which is now the Lincoln bedroom, and where he kept his collection of all things Lincoln. So Clarence Liggins was still working for the state at the time of Henry Horner, and Henry Horner and Clarence were extremely close. And Governor Horner passed away from a stroke. He died in Wilmette, and Clarence was with him. Clarence accompanied Henry Horner's body back to Springfield. He dressed him for his final resting place, and stayed with him until they buried him. That is what an amazing person Clarence Liggins was, and how important Clarence Liggins is to our. I think we should have a Clarence Liggins statue, actually, because he was just such a good guy, and Henry Horner loved him so much. So when Horner died, in his will, he bequeathed his collection of all Lincoln books and memorabilia to the people of Illinois, and it has actually become the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. And so there you see the then Senator Barack Obama at the opening of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. It's funny how things just keep going, right? Another very famous Illinoisan, Adlai Stevenson, who occupied the mansion from 1949 to 1953. And as you all probably know, he ran for president, I think it was twice. And here he is sitting in his office, which is now the governor's dining room in the lower level of the mansion. He ran his presidential campaign from the mansion and actually wrote his concession speech right there from this desk. Picture of the mansion in the late 50s, early 60s. This picture was taken during the William Stratton administration. And you can really see the white building that the red brick is still being painted over white. And during this administration, Dorothy Stratton was the first one to open the mansion to public tours. So during the Richard Ogilvie administration is when the biggest change happened to the mansion. So the mansion historically has sort of been used a little bit as a political football, as you can imagine, because one party has control of the mansion and the other party doesn't. So if anyone wants to spend money on the mansion, the party that's not in power, they're against it. You know how this goes. So what suffers is the mansion. So during this period, there had been a lot of talk about just tearing the mansion down because it was so expensive to remodel it, but it was in terrible shape. And we have Dorothy Ogilvie to thank that she just stood up and said, there's been way too much history that has occurred in this house. We cannot tear this house down. We're going to remodel it. So she hired two men, Lowell Anderson and James Hickey, who had just finished the remodeling of the old state capitol in Springfield, and she hired them to help her do a major renovation and restoration on the governor's mansion. So they advised her to have Richard Nickel, who's a very, very famous historical photographer. In fact, he was one of the first photographers to really document historic buildings and structures, and we have a lot of pictures of buildings that have been torn down because he took the time to go photograph them. In fact, he was killed at the Chicago Stock Exchange. He was in there taking pictures, and it collapsed on him, and he died. And that actually was just not that long after he took these pictures. So this is what the mansion looked like before the Ogilvies restored it. And I think the interiors are really interesting. Pictures of the time, and of course, these great pictures that actually one of the troopers found in a closet and brought to me right after JB was elected and said, look at these great pictures I found. And I went to the Art Institute because I had a feeling they might be nickel photographs because they were beautiful silver gelatin prints, and it's like, who would else have taken these? So I went and looked in his archives, and sure enough, he had taken them. The negatives were there and other photographs of the mansion. So thank you to the troopers for finding the pictures. So here we have a picture of the mansion undergoing that restoration in the 70s and the layers and layers of white paint that they had to remove to restore the house to its original red brick finish. And you can also see the picture there in the library of Mrs. Ogilvie and the committee that helped do the restoration. So during this time, they added a huge portion onto the back of the house. In fact, maybe we should go to the next slide so you can see that. This whole back part of the house was added on. They restored the front part, which was the classic Italianate, and kept those rooms pretty much as they should have been. In the back, they added a library, a beautiful wood-paneled library that was built from walnut that was harvested from downstate Illinois. They added a large ballroom. You'll see pictures of these coming up, by the way. They added an apartment above the ballroom, which is sort of the private apartment of the governor for his or her family. They added a commercial kitchen to have events. And with this addition, it made the Illinois Governor's Mansion the largest governor's mansion in the United States. It's just slightly smaller than the White House, just by a few thousand square feet. Just to give you some kind of perspective. So now we're up to the Bruce Rauner administration, and as I said before in my opening remarks, that we owe Diana Rauner gratitude because she really started the ball rolling on fixing the house. So if you could flip to the next slide. So here's kind of an action picture of what Diana Rauner did during the time she was First Lady. And there's a picture of Governor Rauner and Diana at the opening on July 4th, 2018. So it was an extensive remodeling and grading of redid the whole entire garden and did quite a lot of work. So this is my favorite part of the whole presentation. I hope you like it too, the before and afters. So as I said before, when JB and I arrived in Springfield and I had to finish the job and redecorate and make the house more comfortable so JB could do the business of the state, I called my friend Michael Smith, who some of you may know. He was the designer of the White House under the Obamas and did quite a lot of work on the White House. And I thought, I could really make a mistake here. I better call someone who really has done this before. And he was so gracious. He volunteered his time and efforts to the people of Illinois and didn't charge me a thing and helped me with this project so we could all enjoy this together. And that's his picture. I think he's rather cute too. He's really, and he's so funny. Was fun to work with. Okay, so here we go, the before and afters. So this is what the mansion looked like when JB and I arrived. Very, nice interior with some historic furnishings. So this is the east parlor that looks into the music room. The east parlor looks like today. This is the Lincoln parlor. It's what that looked like when JB and I arrived, and then the Lincoln parlor today. And these paintings that are in the Lincoln parlor, I borrowed from the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum. And the one of the young Abraham Lincoln there is my absolute favorite thing in the whole entire house. That picture of Abraham Lincoln was painted from life from a gentleman who lived in Springfield, Reverend Clover. And he recognized Abraham Lincoln's specialness at the time and painted this portrait of Abraham Lincoln when he was still in the State House in Springfield. And I think there are only 4 or 5 from life paintings of Abraham Lincoln, and I think the state of Illinois has maybe 4 of them. And this is one of them. I just absolutely love this young picture of Lincoln because you can see what a kind human being he was. I think Reverend Clover did a great job capturing that. So this is the music parlor. When I arrived with JB. And a lot of the things that are in these pictures, the Rounder administration had borrowed from people across the state, so we actually didn't own any of these furnishings. So I had to replace everything because they were just on short-term loan. And the next slide is the music parlor today. So I really set out to try to showcase the best of Illinois through decorative arts and craft. And the self-portrait there of Gertrude Abercrombie is an artist that I greatly admire, a woman artist who was very involved with the University of Chicago. And she, in the past maybe 5 years, has really begun to garner a lot of steam in the fine arts community. And some of her pieces are going for $500,000 now. So she's really come into her own. And the State Museum had a huge collection of her work because she left her estate to the state of Illinois. So we have a huge collection of Gertrude Abercrombie's. That's where I got that. So this is the state dining room, what it looked like when I arrived. Interesting about this room, the mirrors there are 2 of those mirrors on either end of the state dining room that were left by Governor Yates. So during the Civil War, he left those in the house when he left. Usually what happened when you were elected governor, you had to bring your own furniture. There was nothing there. So that's why there really isn't a lot of historic pieces that are left in the mansion. And then when you left being governor, they would have a yard sale. and you could go buy the governor's bed or towels, I don't know. And but Governor Yates left these 2 mirrors. And during the 1970s renovation, a women's group, I can't remember which one it was, got together and bought those 3 chandeliers, and they're from Ireland, and installed them in the mansion. This room used to actually be 2 rooms. There was a breakfast room and then the dining room. Do you remember that picture of the bewilderment of decor? That was taken in this room. So you can see it had been remodeled several different times. And the next slide is what it looks like today. And what's interesting about this picture is, do you see the silver in the picture? That silver was received for the people of Illinois during Adlai Stevenson's tenure. And that silver was created during World War II for the USS Illinois. It was customary that when a battleship was named after a state would raise money and provide the silver for the officers' mess on the ship. So luckily for us and for the rest of the world, World War II ended. They never finished the ship, and they had all of the silver. The set wasn't complete, but it was, maybe halfway done. And so they gave the silver back to the state of Illinois and to the people of Illinois, and Adlai Stevenson received it, and it's been in the mansion ever since. So this is the Walnut Library that was added on during the 70s renovation and addition. This was all black walnut that was farmed in southern Illinois. And a gentleman by the name of Monty Hall, not the game show host, but a wood carver from Illinois, made this beautiful library for the people of Illinois. And this is right off of the ballroom. It's really a beautiful room. And the next slide will show you what it looks like today. Another interesting fact, this plaster bust of Abraham Lincoln was created by the artist from life from Abraham Lincoln between the time he was elected president and the time he left Springfield. And he carved this, the model, at the St. Nicholas Hotel in downtown Springfield. And Abraham Lincoln would go sit for an hour or so. I don't know he had time for all this, but he did. He went and he sat and he carved the mold, and then I think there were 6 castings of plaster of Abraham Lincoln bust, and this is one of them, was given to the mansion. This has been in the mansion since the 70s, I believe, a really long time. So this is the ballroom that was added on during the 70s, quite a large ballroom, and the next slide is what it looks like today. So add a little furniture and zhuzhed it up a little bit. And what's interesting about this picture is I'm sure you all recognize that portrait of Abraham Lincoln. It's painted by a man named Healy, and it was donated to the White House, I believe during Eisenhower's administration, and it was donated by the Lincoln family. But before they donated the original Healy to the White House, hangs in the state dining room, by the way. You all recognize it, right? The family had it copied, and this is the copy. And the last surviving heir to Abraham Lincoln donated it to the people of Illinois, and it's been hanging in the mansion ever since. But I think it's really great. I was on the committee for the preservation of the White House, and at my first meeting, it was in the state dining room, and I said, I bet you all don't know about this picture. I have one too. Y'all think you're cool, but we have one too. And they didn't know, so I actually sent them all the backup documentation. So now that lives at the White House. Kind of neat. I hope it's still there. Next slide. Are you laughing back there? It's the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. So this is that famous elliptical staircase that at one point had been changed to the straight stair, and during the 1970s, they restored it back to the elliptical. And I did a little change on the floor. As you can see, the gray and white tile. Anyway, it's such a beautiful staircase. I love to show this picture. This is what they called the children's bedroom, and it was added on during the 1970s addition. And I'm sure a lot of you recognize this red flocked wall covering, because I had this in my house growing up. So this room had not been changed since the 70s, and it smelled like it too. It was really kind of stale in there. So Michael and I decided we wanted to change this room into the Chicago room to honor the history of Chicago architecture and interior design. So we changed it into the next slide, the Chicago room today. So we really used Frances Elkins and Samuel Marks as our inspiration. And some of you may know that Frances Elkins was the sister of David Adler, very, very famous architect. And she was famous for this kind of silvery wall covering and these 4-poster beds that some of them she installed were made out of bone. They were kind of Indian looking. These are plaster, and Michael actually had one of these Frances Elkins plaster beds that he let me copy and make two of these Francis Elkins beds. We use this room as a guest room. When my husband has friends come or dignitaries come, we offer them this room to stay in. So you can actually sleep here. And the cabinet is a Samuel Marks piece of furniture that I bought at auction. It came up for auction during COVID. I'm like, oh my God, I think that fit perfectly between those two doors. So I snapped that up for the Chicago room. This is the Lincoln bedroom. This is where the picture of Henry Horner with all of his books was in this room. And that's why we really call it the Lincoln bedroom. And the furniture in the Lincoln bedroom was donated by the president of the University of Kentucky, whose family had bought it from, again, you'll be surprised, an Abraham Lincoln yard sale. They sold off the contents of his house after he was assassinated. And I don't think Abraham Lincoln ever slept in this bed. It's way too short for that, but this did belong to him. And so that is sort of the basis for the furniture in this room. And the next slide will show you what it looks like today. And again, we use this as a guest room, so you can we have our own Lincoln bedroom in Illinois, and people can stay in it. Interesting about this are the two portraits on either side of the bed. We have a picture with the dark red background. That is William Bissell, who was the second governor to live in the House. That was very good friends with Abraham Lincoln. And the other picture is of Colonel Baker, Edward Baker, who was Abraham Lincoln's one of his very best friends, who was killed during the Civil War. And their mutual friends got together and had this portrait painted of the colonel, and they went to Washington, D.C. and presented it to the president, who, as you can imagine, probably was just racked with guilt that one of his best friends was killed during the Civil War. So that painting lived in the White House with the Lincolns, and it was donated to the people of Illinois by that last living relative of Abraham Lincoln's. It's so generous that they gave us so many treasures. So this is the sitting room on the second floor. It's known as the Kankakee room because the women of Kankakee during the 1970 renovation got together and raised money to buy this wall covering. It's Zubair wall covering made in France. It's woodblock printed, and the same pattern is in the White House in the receiving room on the lower level where the president receives dignitaries. So they were obviously very influenced by Jackie Kennedy and what she had done at the White House, and they raised the money to get this Zubair wall covering for our mansion. So when I arrived, this had been not well cared for, and it had been raining in this room, and they had laminated the wall covering, and some of it had been colored in with magic marker. It was kind of sad. So Michael knows the Zubair wall covering folks, and so he reached out to them and had them reprint it. So if you go to the next slide, we had it all reinstalled. We took down the original wall covering and saved it, and had it reinstalled with a copy of the new. But the Zubair wall covering factory has been making the same wall cover for over 200 years using the same wood blocking print technique. And I think the next slide is a close-up of what the wall covering looks like. It's so beautiful. So this is in the lower level of the mansion. It's the reception room, and this is what it looked like when we arrived, and this is next slide is what it looks like today. So I have a lot of teas in here. I'll receive visitors. I use a lot more than JB does. I really like this room. And I also have a collection of pottery and china in here that I've collected of. So Picard China makes a lot of china for the White House, and it's the last American-made china factory in the United States, and it's right here in Illinois. You can go visit in Antioch, Illinois. So in this room, I have a display of Picard china and some of the things that they make for the State Department. I have a set of Barack Obama's White House china. I have a set of Camp David china and Air Force One china, which I think nobody gets to see that. So come to Springfield to see the china. It's in this room. So this is the First Lady's office. I just couldn't write a book on that desk. And it was borrowed too, so I had to give it back. So the next slide is what my office looks like now. I could write a book on that desk. Right. So this is what they call the governor's dining room now, and this is where that picture of Adlai Stevenson was taken. This is what it looked like when we arrived in Springfield, and the next picture, this is what it looks like today. So I commissioned some Illinois artisans to do a kind of a folk art Zubair-inspired wall covering to paint historic scenes of Illinois. So they're geographically correct. If you're standing looking east, that's what Illinois looks like to the east and all the way around the room. And we actually use this room quite a lot. JB, he probably uses this more than any other room in the mansion. He has a lot of breakfast meetings and luncheons and small dinners to negotiate legislation in this particular room. And there's a close-up of the Mississippi River that, is our western border. So this is actually the governor's office, which is directly across from the governor's dining room. And this is what it looked like when we arrived. And the next slide is what it looks like today. And there he is, hard at work. Yeah. I have to admit, this photo was staged. He is not that neat. Not that neat. He's not here, so we can poke fun at him. But there he is in his office. Okay, next slide. So this is just kind of a montage of kind of what the house has looked like over the years. I think it's pretty self-explanatory of what it looked like at the beginning, and then the cupola roof project, and the white paint to make it look like the White House, and then the restoration, and what it looks like today. So I just threw this in here because I just thought y'all might like it. I like China, and I thought you might enjoy this. So I did a little segment on setting the table to just show some of the beautiful China that Picard made for us. When I arrived, I realized that there had been no new China added to the mansion since, I think, the Edgars added some China. And I thought, I'm going to go visit Picard, and I really wanted to see how this was all done. And I was like, well, I should have some China too. So we came up with a pattern. We were inspired by the oak leaf, which the white oak is the state tree of Illinois. And we made some China. So next slide. So there's a picture of the white oak tree, and what you all can commission your own China too from Picard. If you want to put your initials or your picture, they'll do anything. But I think they did a great job. The new state China. The picture with the almond cake, which actually is a historic recipe that Mary Todd Lincoln used to make for Abraham Lincoln, apparently was his favorite dessert, and we make this and serve it at the mansion today. And we have one piece of Mary Todd Lincoln's china, which, don't tell anyone I put the cake on it and took the picture. I don't think you were supposed to do that, but I did it anyway for the book. Anyway, that was her actual personal china. And so I was inspired by her to do the dessert service with the violet, which is the state flower. So that's why those are shown together. So this is just a photo showcasing that sterling silver that Adlai Stevenson had received. And it's still in the mansion. It's really beautiful. Can you imagine what that would cost today? I mean, it's just incredible. I think it was made by C.D. Peacock. So really beautiful. And there's a picture of the punch bowl that we use for flower arranging. This is my last slide. These are the Strattons, and it's a great picture of them at the front door of the mansion and welcoming everyone in. And I would like to continue on with Dorothy Stratton and invite you all to come to the mansion and take a tour. If you really want more information about the mansion, you can go on YouTube and just put my name in. A company by the name of Homeworthy came to visit, and I had my own Homeworthy program. It's about 30 minutes long, where I gave a tour of the mansion. It's on this YouTube channel called Homeworthy, but you can go on there if you want a more detailed tour. And I would like to thank Rizzoli Publishers, who took a chance on a first-time author and published my book so I could share all of this with you. Thank you very much.
MK, thank you very much. I love how you signify Dorothy and all that. So behind me is Anton Kerner, and I want to tell you that the legend lives on that when Dorothy's husband left the governor's mansion, she received the #1 plate for the state of Illinois.
Wow.
Her daughter Liz has it, and my friend Anton, the son of Otto Kerner, has #2. So
Wow.
we know where 1 and 2 is these days.
Well, if you ever want to lighten your load and get rid of them, we'd be happy to have them back.
And there's a funny story about 15 years ago. They did a story on license plates, and they had the 1 and the 2. And they asked Dorothy, "Well, how did you get #1?" And she says, "Well, I'm a good Republican from Illinois. I can't afford any more numbers."
Oh my God. That's so funny.
I have had several tours of the governor's mansion, and the chandeliers in the state dining room were at one time described as Waterford.
That is correct. I think they
They
came
are
from
Waterford.
Ireland. Yes.
Okay. At my first tour, 2 of the chandeliers had the same color pendants, and one was different. And on my last tour, they all have the same color. Do you know who was responsible for that?
It wasn't me. I have no idea. Sounds like shenanigans to me. Maybe I need to investigate this. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
How much time
What-
do you get to spend at the mansion?
Well, I have to say, I have really fallen in love with Springfield. I love the town of Springfield. It has a great sense of humor, this town, and the people are so kind. And, Jim Edgar lived in Springfield and was so kind to JB and I, he and his wife, Brenda. I really love Springfield. I hope all of you come and visit. There's so much to see. I don't spend the majority of my time there. I'm there during state fair. I love the state fair. I bought back and forth. When JB was elected, I had young kids, they were in high school. So I had to keep that going. I'm there a lot more between January and May when session is going on. I don't like to leave JB down there alone because he just, it's just so much pressure and he's by himself, right? So it's I like to keep him company.
What does JB stand for?
Oh, JB is named after his 2 uncles, his Uncle Jay. Some of you may have heard of him, Jay Pritzker, the pavilion. Uncle Jay. And then his other uncle, his name was Robert, but everyone called him Bob. So JB's father, Don, named him after his 2 brothers, JB.
When I hear you're going to be coming to Oak Park,
Back in the Evanston day,
that was it was a long time ago.
long time ago.
You were living in Wilmette.
Well, it's actually Evanston. We're 1 block away.
Sorry,
Oh my God, it's hard to see with the glare of these lights, but yes, how are you?
life is good.
You sound good.
Well, I wanted to see you and you and JB, and
Wow, that was a long time ago, like in the early 90s.
that's right, quite a while ago.
Good to see you.
I just wanted to see you.
Aw.
Thank you very much for coming. I really enjoyed this presentation, but I did go and stay. My husband and I and 2 couples had the privilege of staying overnight in the governor's mansion when it looked like all the burgundy all over in that
Yes.
time. And it was lovely. We had a dinner there, so we really enjoyed it. And boy, you did a beautiful job.
Thank you so much.
But
Thank
I
you.
want to ask you a question. You said the governors all sell off the furniture?
Historically, yes.
Are you going to
No.
do that in the future? No. Okay.
What was the most challenging part of this whole process for you?
The whole thing, really. I mean, you probably have heard a lot of people say, oh, I want to write a book someday. Writing a book is really, really hard. And I have to admit, during the whole process, at some point, I was just like, how did I get myself into this? It was really hard work. I mean, I loved every minute of it, but it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever personally done in my life because I had to handle the photographer and find a publisher. And then once I was under contract to Rizzoli, it was like there was no backing out, right? So I had to finish it. And I also want to mention all the proceeds from this book go to the Mansion Association for the endowment of the mansion. So I didn't make any money off of this. It's my gift to the people of Illinois.
Hi, I'm a big quote person, and one of the quotes that from the Pritzker family that I really, really like is, "Your only immortality is the impact you have on your successors," by Nicholas Pritzker. And
is true.
For you, and it just hit me and makes me think of myself as a future ancestor. And my question to you is, growing up on the farm with your grandma back in Nebraska, and my family is from farmers as well, how has that impacted you? And what do you hope is your immortality and impact in your successors in the future?
Wow, what a great question. Well, first of all, I'd just like to point out that one of the reasons why I wrote this book is that I wanted to tell the stories of some of the people and their impact on me and all of us. And I thought it was really important to write about them and not forget those stories. And tying that in to my grandmother was a traditional housewife. She lived on a farm with her husband. It was at one point a hog farm. And my grandparents worked really, really hard. My grandmother was the church secretary for the church in the little town of Beatrice, Nebraska. And I would spend every summer with her. And she taught me to really be self-reliant. So she taught me how, to wire a lamp. She taught me how to bake a coconut cake. I took care of the pigs. I learned about taking care of all kinds of animals. My grandfather, he would take in retired horses and had a pasture for retired horses, so I'd have to help with the horses. And, to learn to really be self-reliant and not really count on anyone else but yourself, and that, you could do it yourself is basically what she taught me. She was such an amazing woman. And at that point, nobody in my family had gone to college. My father went to college, so they were very simple farmers. But when I look back on my life, it's one of the sweetest memories I have, is spending the time with my grandmother. So I hope I'm honoring her by doing all of this, because she really taught me how to stand up, and when life presents you an opportunity, you grab it. And I have a responsibility as First Lady to do the best job I can, and to the people of Illinois, and I hope I'm honoring her by doing that.
Simple question. How old are your children?
Oh gosh, my son is going to turn 21 next month, and my daughter just turned 23.
Will you recreate the Rose Garden when you're First Lady of the United States?
Oh my God. I would be happy to help whoever that is in the White House.
You talked about the presidential portrait of Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the certificates of authenticity. Do you think that Lincoln's may have switched the original with the copy, that you have the original and the state dining room in the White House has the copy?
This sounds like a good conspiracy theory to me. Do you think we got to put that out there and see if it catches any traction? No, I don't think so. But maybe, I don't know.
So thank you for being here. This is just wonderful. I'm so glad I was able to come. I have been listening to all the questions, so I'm learning a lot just from listening to the questions. But I have one tiny one. You've talked about writing the book was one of the hardest things you've ever done. And I got, all the things you mentioned, the photographers and dealing with people and being stuck, for lack of a better term, with the Rizzoli contract. And I get those difficulties. But what about time management? Is there something you can share with us about how you fit it into your busy schedule?
Well, actually, I did the majority of this work during COVID, so I was like all of you, shut in, right? And I was going to make the most of my time, and this is how I spent it, writing this book. But writing is really hard. I don't know if any of you are writers, but you just got to get going and put something on the page and organize. A lot of this book was about filing. I really got intimate with Dropbox and making outlines. And I mean, it was really difficult because I'm not a writer, and it was really, really hard, but I learned so much. I bet if I had it to do over again, I could do it in half the time. Because I spent a lot of time redoing because I didn't know what I was doing. So, yeah, that's how I found the time. It was a COVID project.
What is your favorite painting at the Art Institute?
Oh. Well, the Blue Guitar by Picasso, maybe, because my son went on a field trip to the Art Institute and came home and told me that he was going to buy it. So I'm kind of partial to that painting.
I went to University of Nebraska-Lincoln too, so we're kindred spirits that way. My question is, are the fireplaces in working order in the governor's mansion, or are they all...
Well, unfortunately, they during the Rauner renovation, they didn't put the lighting gas lines back in, and they didn't restore the chimneys, so they're not working.
I just would like to thank you for your contribution to the preservation of our history.
Thank you.
Particularly during these times of historical facts being challenged.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, this has to do with infrastructure, because I know when you have these old buildings, you had mentioned that the infrastructure had already been worked, so you have up-to-date air conditioning, heating, and electrical lines and stuff, which is why you may not have the chimneys working.
Right, yeah.
But I don't think you could, but it's very important to keep that up and also make sure your roof doesn't leak. So, those things can be overlooked and destroy stuff.
That's exactly what happens.
And I know, so I'm glad that was already done, because you couldn't do anything else till that was already done.
That's correct.
So you came in just as you said, the icing.
The icing to the cake.